Hey everyone, this is John here, and in today's video we're going to take a look at how we can deal with changing column names in Power Query. So I've got a query set up here and it's importing a CSV file, and one of the columns here says revenue, and then there's a $sign in there, and I've got a couple of these CSV files. So that was report sample 1 that I had imported, but if I take a look at report sample2.csv, then those column names are the same, except for the revenue here is actually in Swedish kronor. So it says revenue and then in parentheses SEK. And I'm going to close that. And same thing with the report sample 3. If I open that up, that column says revenue, and there's actually a $sign in between some parentheses. Now I've got my query set up with the parameter for the file name. So if I go and change my file name parameter, and instead of report sample 1, if I try and import one of the other ones, so report sample 2, and close and load that, and try and refresh this query, I got this error here. So the column revenue $sign of the table wasn't found. So I'm going to go back and edit this. And that's because, so I've got the source step and I'm importing the file, and then I promote the first column to headers, and then I do a step here that breaks things. So I change the data types. So in this step, you can see that I'm referencing the different columns to change them. And one of the columns I'm referencing is that revenue $sign column. So I'm just going to go back and change this back to a 1, so report sample 1. Then go back to my data query. And before I change the data type, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some other things first so that I can dynamically change this column header. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually remove all the data. So I'm going to remove all the data, and I'm going to do that by keeping the top rows, and I'm actually just going to keep the top 0 rows. So if I put in a 0 there and click on the OK button, that's going to get rid of all the data, and my table is now empty. And I'm going to go up into the Transform tab, and I'm going to actually use the headers as the first row. And then I'm going to transpose this, and then I'm going to filter down my table. So I'm going to use a text filter, and I'm going to filter on things that begin with revenue. So the thing that all those CSV files had in common is they all started with revenue and then had something else after. So if I filter on revenue and press OK, then that's always going to result in this single row being left in my table. And then I can drill down to that to create a single value, but we're obviously interested in importing the whole table. So I'm going to add a step to my query. And instead of referencing this previous step, which was column 1, actually before I do that, I'm going to cancel this step. I'm just going to rename this, right click and rename. And this is going to be my replace name step. So I'm going to use that to replace the name of the column later on. And now I'm just going to go back to the last value, or the last step in my query before I started this process of keeping the first rows and demoting headers and all that kind of stuff. So if I type in the last step here, which was promote headers, and just get rid of this stuff, and if I click on this check mark, then what we get is we're back to this same step here. So I've just done a bunch of intermediate steps, and then come back to this promote header step. Now what we're going to do is we're going to double click on this to replace or rename the column header. So we're going to get rid of those. We're going to get rid of the $sign there and press enter. And now you can see that that's created some M code here. And we can see that up in the M code, what we're doing is replacing this revenue $sign with just revenue. But we want this to be dynamic. So what we're going to do is change this from a text string to reference our replace name step there. So if we type in replace name and accept that, then nothing really changes here, but this is now a dynamic renamed column. And now we can go through and change our data types. So we can change that to a date, and that was a text. And here we can change this to a whole number and a currency here. And now if we close and load this, we get our report sample1.csv data returned nicely. But now if we go into our parameter and edit that, and let's try importing report sample 2 again, and close and load, and right click and refresh that, then we get our data from that file. And notice that the column here just says revenue, but now I can use the same query to import any of those CSV files regardless of what's happening with the revenue column. So that's how we can deal with changing column names in Power Query. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for future videos on Excel and Power Query. That's it for this video. See you guys in the next one.